Hey guys, welcome back to the Convo Couch. My name is Connie.
I'm Sun.
And we have our very special guest called Renee Lim.
Hi.
She is a very multi-talented actor. She can sing, she can model. She's also a medical doctor, hosts shows on the ABC, SBS on food and medical advice. She's also a CEO and entrepreneur and just pretty much an all-round legend. So thank you so much for joining us.
I don't need to live up to that, do I?
Just to name a few. Thanks so much for coming today.
Very happy to be here.
So I met Nay when she was directing a short and sweet play. And it was such a wonderful experience with both you and all the other girls. I think we're all quite different, not just in our acting, but also just in personality. So it was so nice to see us all brought together. And then she actually has this platform called Nay in the Life, which is, how would you describe it, like multi-platform, like educational resources?
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a combination of sort of a blog type personalized storytelling with that idea of sharing stories for developing social communities and resilience and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's such a great idea with a multimedia platform, and like people can see your writing, and you've got funny videos that I guess make people like laugh about certain situations. But I think some of the videos that you shoot are quite personal as well, right? Like it's got like that blog that you have reflects a lot about you and your personal life, maybe, and the situations that you come across.
Yeah, so I suppose that's when I say my life is crazy. Like I actually did a talk for some Year 12 students who were graduating last year, and I went in and, you know, I said, look, this is who I am. And everyone always wants me to talk about my life. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, these are all my jobs. And
Yeah.
I have this little kind of like PowerPoint slide now, which has pictures of me from all these different media outlets and doing different things.
This TV show and this one.
Yeah, so I just kind of go like, hey, this is me. So, CEO, blah, 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 like the list you just said. And I go, I don't really give a crap about any of that because that's just stuff I do. And then I go, and this is the real me, and there's this list. And so it says 7 people died in 6 years under the age of 40 in my life that were very close to me. My house burnt down. I have a lot of mental illness in my past relationships and in my family. And I own 2 properties in Sydney, which I'm very, very proud of. And I have a tree. Like I own a tree in Sydney, which is a really big thing for me. And I still sleep with a stuffed toy. So that's kind of my list that I guess I put out there when I say, well, this is actually who I am, right? Because in the end, to be honest, I've never really had any goals in life. So all of my career stuff is quite accidental. So I can't really own it. But I think sharing those stories that you're talking about from Nay in the Life are very much an opportunity for people to go, they see this shiny person, but in fact, I've probably had more crap than, you know, a lot of people have, and I'm dealing with it in my own ways, but you can still be a shiny person and have a lot of crap, or you can have a lot of crap even though you're a shiny person, and either of those things are really important things for people to kind of be aware of. I did an elective in London when I was in my 5th year at uni, and every medical student gets sent away. Like they get to like tell their parents, I need to go to a foreign country and I need to spend like 3 months somewhere else, and like you need to pay for it because it's part of my degree. And at the time, the exchange rate in London was 3 to 1, the pound to the Australian dollar. Can you imagine? So I was like, I'm never going back to London ever. Mummy, you have to pay for this trip to London. So she sent me over there to do my elective. While I was there, I did pediatrics and psychiatry, which were my 2 interests at the time. And in psych, I met a girl who was my age, born very close to me, who had a very similar history, childhood history to me. There's a sort of, I suppose, abuse and I suppose different family dynamics and then partner dynamics. And the interesting thing was that I was the medical student talking to her, and she was a young girl who'd been institutionalized since she was 14. So, and it wasn't that she wasn't smart. It wasn't that she wasn't, you know, a beautiful person. It wasn't that she didn't care. It wasn't any of those things. She just had a different framing of how those events affected her and then made different choices. And again, there's nothing wrong with her choices. But I guess it made me realize that I do have to choose how I respond to things. And because of the way I had responded to certain things, I had a different life to her. Not to say that, you know, hers was bad and mine was good. They're just different. And I think that's the core of every human being is, you know, the less you spend trying to wonder why someone made the wrong choice and just trying to work out why they made the choice that was right for them at the time, the more likely we are to have empathy and care for each other. Well, for me, I always say this to people when I probably end up a lot like talking to people when they're having trouble. A lot of my friends, I always go, it should never be a compromise. It should be a choice. You know, yes, you always give up something. Something always has to go away if you make a choice. You make a decision. You can never have a decision that includes everything. But it's not a compromise. It's not like you've lost out. It's just a choice you've made. And as soon as you can make that clear to yourself, and you're the person you need to convince, not anyone else, then it becomes a very different journey because the frame is different. So, yeah. So my parents are from Malaysia. I have sort of mixed heritage. They were childhood sweethearts, moved to Perth. Had me and were separated by the time I was 18 months and divorced when I was 3. It probably reflects a very complex and disjointed childhood. I travelled overseas at least 3 times a year to see my mum, so I'd go every holiday. So I actually didn't spend a Christmas, something I only realised quite recently, I didn't spend a Christmas with my dad for pretty much most of my life. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I may have only had 3 or 4 Christmases in total with my father, because all my Christmases with my mum. So it was a very different lifestyle. So Malaysia was where my mum moved back to. We were very well off over there. In Australia, we were in Perth, in a very poor suburb. Not poor, but like not a rich suburb. So I was kind of moving from, like, if you can imagine, lower middle class Australian community through to rich Gucci buying.
Crazy rich Asians.
Yeah, literally crazy rich Asians. So I was living both of those lives. And then obviously with all the complexity of growing up in essentially a very white sort of community. So all of my friends, most of them were either Caucasian or at most Mediterranean. I didn't have that many, I suppose, Asian friends from school. We had one group of my Asian friends who I'm still really close to. So and I was the oldest. So I don't know if you guys have those equivalents, but there's like the family unit group where all the parents are all friends. And so you all hang out together at all the parties. Yeah. And, you sort of wear the same sort of clothes and there's all these photos of you all kind of smiling together at everything. And you sort of age by 6 months every time. So I've got that group and we're actually still really good friends, which is lovely. But at school and in my friend circles, my best friend was Italian. My other 2 best friends were Caucasian. Our social circle was definitely very white. So I was a very ABC, and sort of very much a banana as well. So very white on the inside, I think. And balance that out with being in Asia 4 times a year. Yeah. And kind of then being the very Chinese daughter that I had to be over there. Yeah, pretty.
How was that? Maybe that's how you first started being able to be like, I'm a really good actor, because you were able to adapt so well.
Yeah, I think most likely that's probably where my performance skills have come from, a combination of seeing a lot of different things, being very reflective and naturally being, and I don't use this term in a positive way, I'm very empathic. So I feel what other people feel a lot. And that's not a cool thing. Like, that's not like saying, I'm one of those, like, I'm really empathic people, which are people like to say. It's just something that I do. So having met a lot of people and being absorbing of their emotions. And then on top of that, obviously traveling between these different places and being different things to different people, probably definitely and that maybe that's part of it, is it either grew the skills, or if I didn't have the skills, it was going to fail miserably. Yeah. So, I was talking to a counsellor recently, and I sort of was like, okay, so here's the summary. And she was like, oh, okay. So she goes, I'm guessing you're hypervigilant, hypercompetent, and very adaptable. And I went, oh yeah, that's pretty much it. There we go. That's right. Sort of me in a nutshell. So I suppose the biggest advice that I would give to someone who was dealing with something like that would be to say, just take a moment to go, this is not your fault, first of all. It's never your fault that your parents got divorced. And when you say you wish that they could have stayed together, or you wish things were different, is there even a realistic possibility that that version of what you wish for could exist with the 2 people who are your parents? And if it couldn't, then in fact you should probably be very glad that that situation is not there now, because that would probably be more toxic for you. It's still really sad, but with so many people nowadays not having, the typical 2 parents.
Yeah.
It's probably not unusual. And the core thing is probably just to be really aware of when you when you feel affected by the fact that they're not there. So whether it's I feel rejected, I feel unloved, I feel unvaluable, I feel lonely, I feel unsupported. When you feel sad that your parents have broken up, it's usually a bit more complex than just it's all their fault that they broke up and so now my life is crap. It's like, well, actually, you're probably feeling one or two of those things at any particular time, and the ability to find other ways to have those things is part of what you do. Absolutely. You know, whether it be your parents, whether it be a counsellor, whether it be friends at school, you know, a teacher. Nowadays, on the internet, you know, I mean, I don't condone it hugely because I don't love the fact that people turn to like people on the internet for all of their solutions, but I have a website, so I can't really say anything. But I guess, yeah, I mean, you can turn to so many resources now, and there's so much more available, you know. Yeah. Back in the day, if I was like, I feel really abandoned, I don't know what that means, I could go look it up in an encyclopedia, right?
Dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, but now it's like, well, no, I just get on the internet and I go abandoned child, and then 50,000 things come up. The flip side is not to turn your story into someone else's story or theirs into yours, and not to catastrophize what you're experiencing in a way that, because I mean, if you Google abandoned child and you come up with 100,000 stories and you go, my God, everyone's abandoned, my life is horrible, there's no way to move forward from that. And I think that, you know, that's the disablement that then leads to mental health illness and you know, all those sorts of things that are very real and are very concerning, but also become very debilitating for the people involved. So I probably fail in this area. I have never, ever personally had any real experience or thought about this concept of colourblind casting, for example, until it was kind of put to me in an article that I was this poster child of this colourblind casting context. I think the reason why, though, is probably because I never wanted to be an actor. So I wasn't aware of the lack of it. And I'm not a very judgmental person. I don't tend to be very... I don't tend to see people in boxes very easily. So I probably just didn't notice. Like I was thinking, oh, that was a good show. I didn't see the character. He did this and he's really happy and and I wasn't going, oh, they're all white and he's white and she's Chinese or... So I think I probably wasn't thinking about it. And I spent a lot of time, as I said, overseas. So I was seeing a lot of TV in other countries. So maybe I wasn't really, like flicking to it. So by the time someone pointed out to me that, did you know, I mean, and I will no, before that happened, the reason it came up, I've been asked to come and talk to a reporter for Equity. And I was shooting on this show and it was with a really great sort of like, I suppose, indie director, Lily Cheng. And she's Eurasian and she really pushes this idea. So she uses me for a lot of things and I love that. But she was like, yeah, oh, that's great, you know. And I understood what she was saying. And I understand that other people's experiences have not been the same as mine. And so from that perspective, of course, I'm very willing to say, you know, but if 40% of the population are not Caucasian, then surely at least 30% of what's on TV should not be Caucasian, for example. But then, you know, being me and being someone who like always goes, what's the other perspective? Yeah. Like the flip side argument I kind of came up with was I was like, yeah, but you know what we're not realizing is probably, I know a lot of people who, who are on TV. You guys would say they're all white, but they're not because they're Italian and they're Greek and they're, you know, other nationalities. So from that perspective, there is a diversity. Just because they're not clearly Asian or Indian doesn't mean there isn't diversity, but it's not visible. And so then there's that question of you should make the diversity visible, which I understand. And then I was like, yeah, okay, so that's fair. So, you know, writing stories, etc. But then I would have these people. So the two stories I'll tell you that kind of made me go, I almost don't want to be part of this conversation. The first one was an Asian actress, a gorgeous Asian actress. She's lovely, who came up to me once when we were shooting on a show and actually said to me, she goes, oh, yeah, I saw you in that. I could have done that role. I could have done it just as good as you. In fact, I probably would have done it differently. And was like, in hindsight, competing with me to let me know that because of like she feels really, you know, hard done by because she doesn't get cast in anything, that it's my fault and actually she would have done my job better. And I thought that was really weird. Like it was a very unusual way to look at things. And then the other one was another friend of mine who's of an Indian background said to me, I can't believe they didn't give me that, like they didn't even audition me for that role. And I was just like, but you're part of a family and your two parents are white So how could you have that role?
Yeah.
And he was like, well, they could have just written the story so that it was different.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, because that's actually about the story. The story becomes very different if these two parents have adopted a non-Australian child, which the process of doing that and the reason for doing that and all of this. And he was like, but that's not the point. And I said, but it is the point, because in the end, if you really think about it, what are we trying to do? We're trying to tell stories.
Be authentic to the story.
Yeah. And I suppose as a writer myself and as someone who has a very complex story, I go, that's actually quite selfish. That's an actor going, but I can be that person. I'm like, but you haven't thought about what that person is in the story, you know? And then they did come out with like Secret Life of Us, for example. I think it was Time of Our Lives, where they actually had two parents who'd adopted a Chinese daughter, and I was shortlisted for that. And a girl down in Melbourne got it, which is, you know, great. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a really difficult story to manage, because you've got this, you know, this Chinese girl who's been adopted into this family with these, you know, 3 other children. Like, what's the dynamic? And then when they didn't deal with the dynamic, everyone was like, oh, it's really weird how like the story doesn't deal with that dynamic, like as if they just try to ignore it. And I'm like, okay, so is the story meant to, you know, like, can we not have someone in there who's just that person? And flip side for me, I've been really lucky. I've definitely played very, very Asian chicks. I have no issue with that.
Okay.
Somebody once said to me, how do you feel about having to have like an accent in Please Like Me? And I said, what's your problem with that? And they said, well, I mean, you're a very good actress. You don't need to have an accent to act. And I said, no, I don't. But the character is based on Josh's dad's girlfriend, who is Thai with an accent. Yeah. So are you saying that either she doesn't exist or she's not relevant?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, but, and I said, no, but that's the thing. There are a lot of Asian women with accents. Yes. So if I'm playing an Asian woman with an accent, as long as I believe in that,
you're not doing it in a way to make fun of them. You're just actually being genuine to that character.
Yeah. And also the flip side, I sort of said, and sometimes we do write crazy people, like Spider-Man doesn't exist. He's not an angsty teenage child who can actually shoot webs out of his hand and hurt people. Yeah. But it's a character. Yeah. And people play that character. And as long as you are happy to commit to the character, this weird kind of reverse racism kind of thing that happens is really kind of, I find, a little bit, it's almost like, you know, the white person going, oh, that's really terrible. That shouldn't happen. And I go, why? Well, because you know, as Asians, you shouldn't be judged. And I go, okay, but I don't necessarily think that putting lots of Asian people on TV is necessarily the solution. There's a bigger problem that they're responding to by then pointing it out in the television. And the flip side for me, I've been very lucky. Obviously, I've also been cast in lots of roles that were not specifically Asian, were Asian by name, but not by character in terms of culture background. So I've probably never really had that problem myself. It's very easy to not complain about something when it hasn't affected me. So, yeah.
Yeah, but thanks. That's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. So cool.
I had to create my family from my friends and from other people in my life, and they fortunately were all there. There are so many amazing, beautiful, brilliant human beings in this world, and sometimes, you know, you can skip them or miss them because you're not open to realizing that, you know, gifts are not always shiny and gifts are not always packaged. And so I've been so blessed and so lucky to have such amazing friends in my life, and they're definitely the core of how I've become who I've become and why I do what I do. One of my very, very, very best friends, so pretty much my best friend for my entire childhood, Lisa, died in a motorbike accident in the US a few years ago. And I hadn't seen her family since I'd left high school, and I'd only just sort of stayed in touch with her. And I went back and they asked me to do the eulogy. And I remember at the end of it, I just sort of stopped, and I'd been thinking about it on the plane, and I'd recorded my own version of the Ed Sheeran song Photograph so that they could use that for the montage of the photos. And I realized that basically it was like, I'm saying goodbye to one of my best friends, but actually I'm saying goodbye to my sister, because in a way that I didn't have that from anyone else, she was basically the family that I hadn't had when I was a child. And so that sort of realization, I think, helped me to sort of realize that actually that's probably been the case throughout my entire life. So if I was giving advice to my 5-year-old now, I'd be like, stick to your guns and know that if you're honest and if you're open and authentic and you choose to trust people at your core, the right people will come into your life and you'll be okay.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this really powerful and beautiful and heartfelt conversation. I think we all definitely have the feels right now. Thank you so much, Renee, for your time.
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, and your honesty. And yeah, just advice for anyone out there who has a very multifaceted life, but also has mental health that they're looking after, and they're just trying to make the most of each day as it comes. So thanks, guys. Join us next time on the Convo Couch.
I guess if I was giving advice to my 5-year-old self, I'd probably say, as long as you're authentic and you're open and you're honest, as long as you keep trying, and at your core, just choose to trust the people around you and be aware, you'll find that the right people will come into your life and you're going to be okay.